What's happening, everybody? This is John Denton and welcome to episode 3 of State of Play. On this week's show, I talk about what it means to be a hardcore gamer in 2017. I talk about 3 shorter games that I played over the Christmas break, Abzu, Firewatch and Pony Island, and I answer some of your questions. Okay, let's get on with the show. So to kick things off, I wanted to talk about what it means in 2017 as the year flips over, and Happy New Year, everybody. I wanted to talk about what it means to be a hardcore gamer in 2017. Does that term even exist anymore? Does it mean anything? Now, what I mean by that is rewind 10, 12 years and you would have casual gamers, people who played maybe a bit of FIFA, maybe a bit of Need for Speed, and hardcore gamers, people who bought magazines, went on websites, bought a ton of games, played tons of games. Now those definitions have changed over the last 10 years for sure. You have people who play hours and hours of FIFA and Call of Duty, and they would be considered hardcore compared to someone who's just playing casually on their phone, playing Candy Crush, playing Clash of Clans, something like that. So these definitions have got muddled and changed, and I think we're on the precipice of a really, really interesting shift in gaming as a culture, and I think we've seen a lot of it in 2016, and it's only going to change more in 2017. So I'm assuming if you're watching this channel that you're the type of gamer that's like me, that wants to play a ton of different games, wants to bounce from game to game and get different experiences. Maybe pit stop here, pit stop there for longer games, get sucked into something for a month, 6 weeks, but then move on. That's probably the traditional hardcore gamer in many ways. But at the same time, I know I'm not hugely skilled in any one game at all. You know, I can't hang with the best first-person shooter players. There's not a genre I necessarily specialise in. It's more of a jack of all trades, try and increase knowledge, a breadth situation. You still have people who play mobile games every now and again, or the old game of FIFA, and they're different types of casual or less dedicated gamers that won't necessarily know what all the new releases are. The people who play on consoles and the people who play on phones won't care. Okay, they're not necessarily new, but how do you define someone who's drilled down specifically into one game that just plays Overwatch or just plays Dota 2? Because I can guarantee that those players are probably putting in more hours than you or I. I saw something online over Christmas from a guy that I follow on Twitter who's heavily involved in the esports industry. He used to work for one of the teams and now I believe he's a freelance marketing guy. And he talked about the best people in Dota 2, as in Dota 2 is an industry. Dota 2 isn't just a game, Dota 2 is now an industry. It's now a business. And League of Legends is a business, Overwatch is a business, Call of Duty is a business. And it's a really fascinating time that there can be people just in a game and that's its own thing. And they don't even necessarily need to be esports games. I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're going to see a shift. Look at it like this. I know people who make a living, I know people who make a fortune on YouTube talking about 1, 2 or 3 games. Really. And if you showed them The Last Guardian, if you showed them games I'm going to talk about later, Firewatch, they probably wouldn't even know what those games are. Would they not be hardcore gamers? I mean, not only are they putting in hours and hours and hours every single day, but they're earning good money. Some earning solid wages, other people earning, genuine fortune just from having extreme knowledge and obviously the video production, all that stuff to back it up. But just on 1 or 2 games, and their knowledge of the industry and knowledge of gaming as a whole is actually quite narrow, but super deep. So I think as gaming has grown and the ways of consuming it has grown so much and expanded, that this is now the situation that we're in. And I think, as we've seen with the console sales of the games last year, with the Dishonored low sales, Watch Dogs 2, Titanfall, which doesn't quite seem as bad as it was, and a few of the others that we talked about in a previous episode, where is it going to be in the next 2 years? Question of the day. What does it mean to be a hardcore gamer in 2017 to you? If you're on YouTube, you're a day in, day out gamer. That's kind of how I describe myself now. Day in, day out. What I mean by that is I'm on the websites every day. I'm on Twitter every day talking about games. I'm trying to follow everything. I'm going to be watching the Switch reveal. I'm going to be watching this. I'm trying to consume as much as possible, but it's basically impossible to consume everything. And I fully understand that. So what does it mean? Question of the day. What does it mean to you to be a gamer or a hardcore gamer in 2017? Have you got wrapped up in the single game culture and you're just drilling down into one game? Are you a Destiny person? Are you a Call of Duty person? Are you a CSGO person? I'd be fascinated to hear from people like that. Have you lost sight of the breadth of the industry? You're not really interested in picking up all the different experiences anymore? There's no right or wrong answer here. it's just an interesting time. It's a shift. What I do for a living is try and anticipate these shifts, and I failed miserably a few years ago when online shifted to video. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't prepared to be on camera as a professional myself, and I wanted to be romantic about the written word. So ever since then I've been trying to anticipate these new shifts and how things are changing. I said in the previous episode that I think the Minecraft thing is starting to plateau and Nintendo's going to make a big comeback, especially in the mobile space. I may be wrong, the Switch may be a massive failure, but even if that is the case, but I think those IPs are so strong with younger people. Anyway, that was the previous episode. We're in a time of change, we're in a time of shifting, it's a cultural shift in gaming. All sorts of new businesses are cropping up, older businesses are dying off, and I want to hear your opinions on where we're going over the next 2 years. I think it's a fascinating time, I don't know about you. So yeah, let me know in the comments, drop me a line on Twitter at John Denton, and let's start a conversation and it'll maybe inform a future show. Okay, moving on from that, I wanted to talk about 3 games that I played over the Christmas break that I didn't want to talk about individually necessarily because they kind of all fed into each other. And that's not necessarily that they fed into each other in terms of gameplay or in terms of style necessarily, but more that, it was more the way I consumed them, more the way that they worked for me at that particular time. And I think that's something that we shouldn't take for granted, how games can work for people at different times. I know when I've been reviewing games, I remember I reviewed Call of Duty 4, and this actually was a time before we really even considered reviewing multiplayer in games. And if the publishers just didn't hold an event to play multiplayer, and even then it was like, are you going to attend that? Does it really matter? Can you imagine that? Does it really matter? Because I can guarantee barely anybody reviewed the multiplayer of Call of Duty 2 and 3 when they were producing their reviews for their magazines and websites. It maybe was covered briefly. So we were still in that mindset, that romantic mindset of the olden days, poorly, and I think the publishers were too, that it was all about the single player campaign. And I remember when I played that single player campaign, Call of Duty 4, I was exhausted that day. I talk more about that part of me as a person, tiredness and poor health in future episodes. But I remember being exhausted that day, sitting on a couch and playing the whole game front to back. And there's no doubt that even though I enjoyed the experience, if I'd been more awake, if I'd been more alert, if I'd been feeling better that day, that my whole experience with Call of Duty 4 at the time would have been different. So back to the point, this Christmas period had very little free time, have family here, have young kids, so it's not like the olden days where you can just sit and hammer one game through the whole holiday period. That's absolutely fine. So what could have suited me better than playing some short games? Nothing. And the way I consume these games made them ideal for that time. I have probably a slightly higher opinion of all 3 of these games just because I was able to consume them in really enjoyable ways. And I think that's important. I don't think you can take each game just as this product, this standalone product, and be objective about it. Especially as we move forward and how we talk about games, I think the circumstances in which you play them are really relevant. I don't think it's an issue to actually talk about that. I think it's actually a positive thing. So back to the 3 games, Firewatch, Abzu and Pony Island. Kicking off with Firewatch, it's about 4 hours long, story-driven game from Campo Santo in the minds that wrote the first season of the Walking Dead game. It's been out for nearly a year, so you probably know all about it. And it was more a case of me just catching up. I'd always wanted to play the game. And I must admit, for the first 2 hours, fascinating game. If you don't know what it is, you play as a guy who's had an issue with his marriage, and he's gone into basically the Californian wilderness to be a Firewatch ranger, something like that. Basically sit in a tower and check if there are any forest fires. So your name's Hank, and you strike up a relationship with this woman on the other end of your radio, who you never actually meet, called Delilah. And the interplay between the 2 characters and the level of dialogue and the level of scripting and the level of voice acting, it's of a really high quality. And so Firewatch starts to tell this really human story, at first anyway, while you explore this fairly simple but beautifully drawn environment, and the interactions within are simple, but you're not just walking about. It feels like it feels tangible. You can pick things up, you can manipulate things. There are light puzzles. Even though it's a very simple pared back game in terms of the pure mechanics, it works for the story. Now, unfortunately, I think about 3/4 of the way through, Firewatch really kind of lets itself down by trying to up the stakes too much. It's a really interesting human story, and I can understand why the writers felt the need to inject a lot of drama and a few red herrings to really try and ramp things up. But I think it does let itself down, unfortunately. And it's still leagues above most game stories in terms of production, in terms of voice acting, in terms of all of those things, scripting, dialogue. But when you hit a level for the first 2 hours of a game and then let yourself down, it can be a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, and I really didn't enjoy the last hour of the game. I thought it was a bit of a letdown. And that's a shame, but the beauty of Firewatch is I was done within 4 hours, so I got to enjoy that whole experience within a brief period of time, consume it in a really satisfying way. I think I did it in 2 sittings. And even though I was disappointed with how the story turned out, and I felt like the stake raising was unnecessary, and I felt like there was one particular moment in the game, and I'm obviously not going to spoil it for people who haven't played it, but one particular moment in the game which is probably like the standout moment of Firewatch that is trying to have the most dramatical impact. And if you play the game, you'll know what I mean. I don't think the game or the story earned that necessarily. So overall, probably slightly disappointing, but only because Firewatch set itself such a high bar early on. Moving on to another game which set itself slightly lower in terms of a narrative experience, but rarely dropped below that bar. It's the beautiful Abzu, which I picked up for under $5 on a Steam sale. A gorgeous game. It's basically Journey Underwater. You play as this weird diver moving through the sea, these amazing shoals of fish moving around you. The graphics and technology behind that, absolutely superb. And basically you're just moving through the game, much like Journey. It never hits the highs of Journey, I have to say that. There's no co-op, so you don't have that beautiful interaction with somebody else. And the points it hits, it actually mimics a lot of Journeys, but it never really feels as poignant as Journey. It's probably telling some sort of eco message that I didn't quite get. It's not something that really struck home with me, but the beauty of the game was there. And again, done within 2 hours. I didn't feel like I was overcharged. It was very inexpensive for what it was, and I'll probably play through it again at some point. So yeah, highly recommended for starters, and a good example of a developer, and it was a lot of people who were involved in that game company who make Journey and Flower, and there's a lot of Flower in there as well. But a perfect example of a game that kind of knows what it is and isn't afraid to just be small and simple and contained, and doesn't feel the need to massively up the stakes and be a game, have to be a video game. That's a bit unfair on Firewatch. It doesn't go that far. There's definitely something to be said for a game that's not afraid to just be short and be self-contained. And I think Abzu does that marvellously, quite frankly. And then there's Pony Island, a recommendation from a few people on Twitter, and thank you very much for that recommendation. Managed to pick it up for just over £1, so no complaints really on terms of value. Pony Island, if you've not played Pony Island or you have no idea what it is and you're thinking, why is he talking about a game about ponies? If you don't want to know at all, and I kind of recommend that, skip forward until the camera changes, because I'll do the Q&A outside. If not, if you don't care or if you played the game, Pony Island is basically a kids arcade game about ponies, real bland nothing game. That's basically been taken over by Satan, and it's one of the coolest ideas that I've seen for a game in ages. Just a really, really clever, smart idea, and it's really well executed to a point. Now what I mean by that, it's kind of a one joke game, and it does as much of that joke as it possibly can. So you start having to hack inside the game, and there's like a trapped spirit in there, and then the game is possessed by the devil, and you're sort of battling between these two things. But most of the interactions in the game come down to two things: playing the actual game of Pony Island, which is a very simple 2D jumping over things and shooting things with a mouse game, super simple, and a hacking mini game, which was kind of like a logic-based thing inside a computer. And the first, I can't complain because I think they're really well done, and it does constantly ramp up the difficulty and ask you to think in different ways. But I must admit, when another one came in and another one came in, it's like, okay, I get the joke. I really don't want to have to do this anymore. And admittedly, I'm not a puzzle guy, and I felt like Pony Island should have perhaps been a little shorter. Even though you can do it in a couple of hours, it felt to me like the joke kind of wore thin a little bit. And by the time I got to the end of the game, I was like, okay, well, we kind of hit this joke early on. And the game cost £1, and it's really clever, and I love the idea, so I don't want to be too negative about it. But by the end of Pony Island, I was definitely kind of done with it. So, unlike an Abzu, which really felt like it was self-contained, I don't think Pony Island would have been hurt by being an hour long. I genuinely don't. I think it could have hit all of those jokes better. There's a section in the middle where it makes a joke about having to grind Pony Island to level up. Then you hack inside the game and get your XP up, so you don't have to do that. But then you actually do have to grind the game by playing about 8 or 9 consecutive Pony Island levels, they're a chore. So it's like, okay, well, you made the joke, but then we kind of have to do it anyway. I don't want to be too negative about something this smart, this clever, this bold. I really don't, because I'm in a situation right now where I am craving stuff like Pony Island, I'm craving stuff like Firewatch, I'm craving stuff like Abzu, these shorter, interesting experiences. We talked before in the episode about breadth versus depth, and I'm currently all about breadth. I want as many experiences as possible. I'm always searching for the new ideas, new gameplay systems, new ways to experience the medium, VR, whatever it is. So, I mean, highly recommend, definitely pick up Pony Island. If you're more of a puzzle person, you might get more out of it anyway than I did. But I'm still very, very happy that I played it. And I'm very happy that I played all three, because the beautiful thing is, if you play a 20-hour game and the back third of that game is boring, you've wasted a lot of time in your life. And leaving games unfinished is kind of a noble thing to do when you're not enjoying them, but it's difficult. I don't know about you, but it leaves me with a bit of anxiety. I've got always in the back of my mind, I need to finish that game. And unless I sell it and get rid of it from my house, I can't fully ever relax. It's always this little niggling thing. So it's really nice to be able to be complete in these shorter games. I'm obviously going to play all kinds of games, longer games, open world 100-hour games, absolutely. But really nice to be able to experience these three things, and very keen to hear what you guys picked up over the sales on consoles and Steam over Christmas period, and what you think about those games and what you think about other games, other things I should be checking out. Okay, so I've headed out into my own back garden to do this week's Q&A, and just before I start, I was just thinking of actually turning this section of State of Play into its own show, just like a JD Q&A, Gaming Q&A, State of Play Q&A, something like that. Not entirely sure of the title, but I think some of the Q&A stuff's getting lost at the end of the episodes, even only after 3 episodes, and I'd like to maybe focus on just doing like maybe a weekly or bi-weekly Q&A show where we can talk about gaming questions, games journalism questions, industry questions, and anything else that comes to mind. So yeah, let me know in the comments or at John Denton on Twitter what you think, and we'll probably convert this section into its own show and take it out of State of Play moving forward. But here we are, a couple of questions this week, and also we'll be able to do more questions that way, which would be more fun. So yeah, a couple of questions this week. First up from, see, I've got my pad. First up from Faded MFC on Twitter. Are there any holes in your gaming history in terms of series you've missed out on, or holes you wanted to fill? Good question. To be honest, there are a few genres that I definitely wouldn't call myself anywhere near an expert on, real-time strategy being probably the main one, and strategy in general, although I've worked hard over the last few years to increase my knowledge of turn-based stuff. But yeah, I never really grew up with a PC. I played a bit of Command & Conquer as a kid, but real-time strategy is just not something that I ever really got to grips with, StarCraft, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, in terms of genres, I would say that. In terms of series, until last year, 2016, maybe 2015, I can't quite remember, I'd never actually played a Castlevania. Last year, or yeah, 2015, I finally picked up Symphony of the Night on Xbox. I was actually writing a piece on it, so I needed to play it and played it to death, and it was fantastic. Obviously dated a little bit, and I don't have the nostalgia that a lot of people do for it, obviously, but you can see the quality there. Whether I'll go backwards from there, I doubt, but I'd be more than up for playing another Castlevania in that vein. Sorry. In the future, or that new one from Izagashi that's coming out, Blood Vein? Sorry. The Blood one, Bloodstained? Don't know. Next question, getting the pad back out. From Christian. Which game or new gameplay system from 2016 will have the most influence on future games? For example, the Dark Souls impact. Now that is a fantastic question, and I'm going to have to link it back into some of the stuff that I've been saying already, and I think it's going to be what we're seeing with games like Overwatch, the single game culture, and how games are becoming more of a service than ever. Now Overwatch doesn't charge for anything other than the chance to win cosmetic items, and I think that is what we're going to see more and more of going forward. I think the days of season passes are dwindling, the days of even paid for map packs and stuff, I don't see them being around for too much longer. I think the future that we're going to see, and I know it's not a gameplay mechanic exactly, so apologies for this slightly woolly answer, but I think we're going to be seeing a lot of cosmetics, a lot of paid for cosmetics, a lot of unusual ways to win them in games, so you're not necessarily buying what you want. I would say it's a slightly unfortunate set of circumstances, but the truth is this is a business that needs to sustain itself,
and there needs to be ways to bring in revenue of games beyond that initial outlay of £50, $60, whatever it is. So I find this one less egregious than season passes. I find it less egregious than paying for content, especially if they're delivering content throughout a year for free. You don't have to have any of this stuff. So I'd say it's probably the least egregious out of all of these systems, but I do think we're going to be seeing an awful lot of it, and we're probably going to be seeing games that don't need cosmetic upgrades suddenly featuring them. So yeah, like I said, just a couple of questions this week because I don't want the show to run too long, but please do let me know in the comments or on Twitter if you do think that turning this into just a regular, not too sure how regular, weekly, bi-weekly, and keeping State of Play for more vloggy stuff, opinions and some sort of broader review stuff, and keeping the two separate. I think it's a good idea. Please let me know. Okay, peace.
Okay, thank you very much for watching. This has been episode 3 of State of Play, and I've been John Denton. If you enjoyed the content here, if you enjoyed this style of YouTube video about gaming, then please do think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. We can always appreciate likes, shares, and massive. I talk about this at the end of every episode. Growth means access. Now, I've got decent contacts already, to be fair, from years in the industry. But the bigger the channel gets, the more opportunities I'm going to be able to get to create better content, and it's going to loop like that as the thing grows. So if you do enjoy the show and you think somebody else might get something from a YouTube video like this or a game show like this, please do think about sharing it with them, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's just hitting them up on their phone. Growth equals access equals better content equals growth, and it's going to go like that. And anybody who shares or likes or comments, honestly, means the absolute world to me. Really, really does. It's amazing that in a few short months we've been able to get to this point in YouTube where hundreds of people are watching these episodes, and hopefully there'll be thousands, 10,000 moving forward. I love all interactions with you guys. Honestly, it's amazing to me, and this is what I'm currently living for in terms of my professional life. So thank you very much. I've been John Denton. This has been State of Play episode 3, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace!